Melissa Aldana, her biography and best hits. During this summer, we're going to be talking about more of her best albums of all time. Here's a quick recap of what's coming up. The second phase of Melissa Aldana's career, her early recordings, offers us something raw and incredibly alive. These are records where you can hear the sound of an artist carving out her space. It's bold, it's curious, and at times it's beautifully unpolished. In this segment, we're turning our attention to the albums that first put her on the radar: Crash Trio, Second Cycle, and a standout piece called Freefall. These works are full of tension, not conflict but creative tension, the kind that happens when someone is testing their boundaries, trying ideas out loud, and discovering how far their musical instincts will take them. There's a kind of electricity that runs through these early projects. They're not about perfection, they're about process. You can hear a young artist asking questions, playing with structure, exploring rhythm and silence as much as sound. You know. You're tuned into the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On this week's episode, it's about Melissa Aldana, her biography and best hits. During this summer, we're going to be talking about more of her best albums of all time. One of the key moments in Melissa Aldana's artistic emergence was the 2014 album Melissa Aldana and Crash Trio. This one's record built around spontaneity, tight ensemble work, and the power of musical dialogue. With Pablo Menares on bass and Francisco Mela on drums, this trio delivers a sound that's open yet grounded, full of interplay, full of fire. Crash Trio feels like a leap forward. It's not a debut, but it's the album that announced Aldana as a bandleader with a clear vision. You hear it in tracks like Tira, Piedras, and Maria, pieces that move through shifting rhythms and unexpected turns without ever feeling uncertain. What makes this album exciting is how alive it feels. Every track is a conversation, not just between musicians, but between the past and the present, between tradition and innovation. The energy is immediate, but there's a depth in the detail. Before Crash Trio, Aldana released Second Cycle in 2012. It's a record that sometimes flies under the radar, but it's important. It captures an artist in transition. There's a searching quality here. The compositions are exploratory. Some feel fully formed, while others feel like sketches. Musical ideas still in the process of being discovered. And that's what makes the album special. It lets us witness the formation of a voice. On pieces like Polyphemus, the title track, there's a tension between structure and freedom. You can hear her stretching out not just as a soloist but as a composer, building longer arcs, trying different ways of organizing sound. And finally, a piece called Freefall, a song that captures the emotional core of that early period. It's a quiet, introspective, and beautifully unresolved track. There's something gentle about the way it floats, how the phrases never quite land where you expect it to. It feels like memory, elusive, fragile, but deeply felt. Together, these three albums offer a portrait of an artist on the rise, fearless in exploration, deliberate in growth, and always listening for the next step. And that was some insight into more of Melissa Aldana's best albums of all time, and you're tuned into the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. And this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On this week's episode, it's about Melissa Aldana, her biography and best hits. Now it's time for some trending music news. One of the biggest jazz festivals on the international calendar just got even bigger. The EFG London Jazz Festival 2025, running from November 14th to the 23rd, has just expanded its lineup, and the new additions are bringing a serious global flavor to this already world-class event. Headlining the new round of announcements is the Aga Khan Music Awards concert, landing at Queen Elizabeth Hall on November 22nd. It's the first time this extraordinary celebration of music rooted in cultural heritage hits the UK and shaping up to be unmissable. Also newly added, award-winning Sarod master Saumik Datta performs his special matinee on November 23rd. Expect a multimedia blend of sound, storytelling and tradition like no other. And the legends are in the building. Tortoise returns to London for their first UK show in years. Their evening show at the Barbican sold out instantly, so they've added a second show, a matinee on the same day, November 22nd. The Idrisi Ensemble brings their Sufi and Dionysian fusion to Union Chapel on November 16th. Nate Smith and the Kinfolk light up Coco on the same night. Lantidote Trio debut at King's Place on November 15th, and an international collab with Melbourne Jazz Fest hits the Barbican and Vortex on November 15th and 16th. On this week's episode, it's about Melissa Aldana, her biography and best hits. During this summer, we're going to be talking about some of her best songs of all time. Here's a quick recap of what's coming up. We've already explored some of Melissa Aldana's most celebrated albums, the records that put her name alongside the greats of modern jazz. But here's the thing, the real treasures often hide in the corners. In every artist's career, there are those tracks that don't get the same headline reviews, but for the devoted listener, they are pure gold. And with Aldana, those moments are everywhere. Pieces that reveal her lyrical tenderness, her literary inspirations, and her fearless rhythmic fire. So we're going to be diving into 5 of those gems. Songs that might not be her most famous, but each one tells a different side of her story. You'll hear a haunting Duke Ellington cover, a bittersweet ballad, a groove-packed Latin burner, and even a track inspired by one of America's most powerful novels. This is Melissa Aldana beyond the spotlight, raw, intimate, and endlessly inventive. And this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan De Silva. On this week's episode, Melissa Aldana, her biography and best hits. During this hour, we're going to be talking about some of her best songs of all time. So far, we've done into the big records and career-defining tracks, but now I want to take you a little deeper. These are the tunes you might not hear in a casual playlist search, but they reveal some of the richest corners of Aldana's art history. They're the deep cuts, the kind of songs that make you fall in love with an artist all over again. Let's start with Come Sunday. This is Aldana's take on a Duke Ellington classic from her Crash Trio album. If you're expecting a big lush Ellington arrangement, think again. This is stripped down to just tenor sax, bass and drums, and it's breathtakingly intimate. Her tone is warm but searching, and there's a kind of prayerful patience in every phrase. It's lyrical without ever becoming sentimental. The trio lets the silence breathe here. You can feel the space in the room. From there, we move to April on the Backhome record. If Come Sunday was meditative, April is bittersweet. There's an emotional push and pull in this track, harmonically rich with melodies that drift between longing and hope. Aldana's sax lines almost feel like they're having a conversation with themselves, as if she's remembering something half forgotten. This is the kind of track you might want to play as the sun goes down. It's understated but leaves you with that ache that only great ballads can give. Fast forward to 12 stars and we get The Bluest Eye, inspired by Toni Morrison's landmark novel. This piece has a kind of gravity. It's not just a melody, it's an atmosphere. Bursts of lyricism, sudden stillness. It mirrors Morrison's themes: beauty, identity, pain and resilience. There's a depth to Aldana's playing here that feels almost literary. Every note is part of a bigger story and the composition unfolds like chapters in a book. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we've got Mendes. This one's pure fire. Latin-infused rhythms, tight interplay between the trio, and a groove that's as much about the bass and drums as it is about Aldana's sax. She dances over the changes with fast, precise lines, but there's an ease to it, like she's having fun. It's the kind of track that reminds you jazz can be both cerebral and physical. You feel it in your head and in your hips. And finally, Elsewhere from her Visions album. This one's cinematic. You can almost see the images it's painting. There's a moody, noir-like atmosphere, with harmonies that feel just a little unsettled, like you're in a dream and not sure if you want to wake up. Aldana's phrasing here is fascinating. She'll start a line softly, then suddenly open it up with this breathy, powerful swell. It's a track that shows her control over dynamics and ability to create a complete emotional world in under 7 minutes. Come Sunday, April, The Bluest Eye, Mendes, and Elsewhere. 5 tracks that might not always make the casual listener's playlist, but each one offers a different doorway into Melissa Aldana's musical mind. If you're already a fan, these deep cuts will deepen that connection. And if you're just discovering her, this is the perfect way to see how wide her artistic range really is. And that was some insight into some of Melissa Aldana's best songs of all time, and you're tuned into the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan De Silva. We're going for a short break. We'll be right back after that. Aldana with The Solitary Seeker. And this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan De Silva. On this week's episode, it's about Melissa Aldana, her biography and best hits. We've come to an end of this week's episode of the Jazz Update, so now let's recap what we were discussing during this program. As we wrap up today's program, let's take a moment to reflect on the extraordinary musical journey of Melissa Aldana, an artist whose voice on the tenor saxophone continues to redefine what modern jazz can be. Born in Santiago, Chile in 1988, Aldana grew up surrounded by music. With early guidance from her father, a professional saxophonist himself, she was drawn to the sounds of jazz from a young age, transcribing solos by greats like Sonny Rollins and Charlie Parker. After honing her craft at Berklee College of Music in Boston, she made history in 2013 as the first woman and the first ever South American musician to win the prestigious Thelonious Monk International Jazz Saxophone Competition. A major moment not just for her but for jazz itself. Over the years, Melissa Aldana has carved out a singular voice, one that's reflective, deliberate and quietly fearless. We explored some of the key albums that mark her evolution. Her 2022 release 12 Stars is perhaps her most personal yet, a meditative and emotional album that blends philosophical ideas with harmonic nuance. And then there's Visions from 2019, a concept-driven project inspired by artist Frida Kahlo, fusing jazz and Latin influences in deeply poetic ways. We revisited Backhome, her dynamic trio album paying tribute to the classic saxophone bass drums format and the raw spontaneity of Crash Trio from 2014. Across these records, one thing remains clear. Aldana is a musician who listens deeply to herself, to her bandmates, to the moment. Her music isn't about spectacle, it's about presence. And in that presence, we hear not just skill, but soul. And that was a quick insight into everything that we discussed on this week's episode of the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan De Silva. And on that note, we've come to an end of this week's episode of the program. Don't forget, you can check out the archives of today's program on my YouTube channel, The Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan. So I'll see you again next week. Have a great week ahead.